Hi, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I'm your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Tracy. Hey, everyone out there listening to us. I just want to say I hope everyone had a happy Mother's Day since that had just passed. Hope you enjoyed doing whatever it is that makes all the mommies happy out there. Anyway, done with the niceties. What kind of llama drama are we getting into today, Trace?
All right, well, I have to tell you, today's story has been sitting really heavy on me.
Oh, geez. I can hear it in your voice already. Am I ready for this?
I don't know. It's a tough one.
All right. What are we getting into?
Yeah, ready or not, here it comes. And it is pure, unadulterated betrayal. Now, before she was a case, before her name was spoken in courtrooms, before investigators tried to piece together the worst night of her life, Janet Chandler was a voice that filled a room, a voice that, by all accounts, didn't quite match the quiet, inward young woman it came from. And if you listen closely enough, past the noise, past the years, you can still hear her. This is the story of Janet Chandler.
Okay, well, before we begin and get into all that, content warning. This episode contains discussions of violence, including sexual assaults. Listener discretion is advised.
Janet Chandler grew up in Michigan, in a home that, by all accounts, was structured, disciplined, and rooted in faith. She was raised in a Christian household, one that valued modesty, responsibility, and doing the right thing. And Janet took that seriously, maybe a little too seriously. From a young age, Janet was known to be sensitive, not weak, not fragile, but deeply emotionally aware.
When you say that, do you mean that she felt things more intensely than other people? Like in a woo-woo way?
Exactly. A little bit of a woo-woo. She was the kind of person that doesn't just hear words, but absorbs them, holds on to them, replays them long after everyone else has moved on. And that matters because it shaped the way she moved through the world. Janet found something that gave her a voice in a way nothing else could, and that was music. She sang, she played piano, and when she performed, something shifted. One of her music instructors would later describe it like this: her voice was deep, rich, powerful, and it didn't seem like it should come from someone so slight, so reserved.
I love that description. It's like she had something inside of her that people just didn't expect from her.
It was almost like her truest self only came out when she was behind the piano or standing in front of a piece of music. But even there, Janet struggled. Her instructor also remembered something else. Janet could not take criticism, even the smallest note. Even the gentlest correction could bring her to tears.
Okay, so she wasn't just emotional or sensitive. She was super hard on herself as well, obviously.
Yeah, very. And that kind of self-pressure doesn't come from nowhere. When you grow up in an environment where expectations matter, where doing things right matters, you don't just want to succeed. You feel like you have to. And when you fall short, even a little, it can feel like everything. Janet initially pursued nursing, a practical path, a stable future, but something about it just didn't fit. So she left.
Well, that had to be hard. To start nursing school is not an easy thing, but We won't go into that. It's even harder for people, especially if they put that kind of pressure on themselves. Nursing school is not for the meek at all.
We know that for certain.
Yeah.
And it was. And instead of staying on that path, she pivoted toward what she loved, and that was music. She enrolled at Hope College, pursuing something that felt more like her. But even there, she didn't quite find her place. Janet wasn't the popular girl. She wasn't part of a tight-knit group. She didn't move easily through social circles. She was more of a loner.
All the more reason that she was even more vulnerable, super sensitive emotionally to everything around her, super hard on herself, and then to not really have a support circle around her. That's super vulnerable, isn't it?
Sure is. Especially when you're someone who wants connection, but doesn't always know how to find it. Now, at some point, Janet stepped away from school. She took a break, tried to figure out what comes next. And that's when she took a job at a place called the Blue Mill Inn. There was a motel in Holland, Michigan. Nothing remarkable on the surface, just another place travelers passed through. But at the time Janet arrived, something else was happening there. A labor strike. And with it, an influx of outside security. The security force brought in was from Wackenhut Corporation, a private company known for supplying guards during labor disputes. Now, these were not local employees. They were transient, brought in from other places with no real connection to the community.
Yeah, transients, living in Florida, I'm familiar with them.
Mm-hmm.
So they come in and they don't know anyone and they don't really have to care about the place that they're in. So,
and environments like that can change fast. What Janet stepped into wasn't just a job, it was an atmosphere. There was drinking, late nights, loose boundaries, and people who didn't always operate within them. For someone like Janet, someone searching for connection, trying to find where she fit, it's not hard to see how she could be pulled into that world.
Yeah, but you say pulled into that world. It's not like she was reckless, but because she wanted to belong to something.
That's right. And we're talking partying every night. And in that environment, even small choices can take on a life of their own. And somewhere in that world, Janet met someone she believed was a friend. Her name is Lori Swank, a co-worker, someone in her orbit, someone who on the surface seemed like a connection, but not all connections are what they appear to be. Janet Chandler was 22 years old at this point, standing at a crossroads in her life, trying to figure out who she was, where she belonged, and what came next. She was not a headline. She was not a rumor. She was not the version of her story that others would later try to tell. She was a young woman with a voice, a future, and a life that was still unfolding. And next, we begin to see how everything around her began to change. And it begins long before that night, but not long after Janet Chandler arrived at the Blue Mill Inn. Something around her began to change. The Blue Mill Inn sat in Holland, Michigan, a roadside motel. The kind of place that didn't ask many questions and didn't expect many answers. But in early 1979, it wasn't just travelers passing through. There was a labor strike unfolding nearby, and with it came outside security. During labor disputes, companies sometimes bring in a private security to maintain order, protect property, and ensure operations continue. And in this case, that security came from the Wackenhut Corporation.
So none of these guys were local guys. They were brought in specifically for the strike, right?
Yeah. And as I mentioned, they were transient, temporary, and largely disconnected from the community around them. They lived out of motels, moved from contract to contract, and in many cases, they didn't have much tying them down. And when you bring a group like that into a small town, especially into a place like the Blue Mill Inn, the atmosphere can shift. And it did. At the motel, boundaries were very loose with all the drinking, pill popping, and late nights, people coming and going at all hours. It wasn't structured. It wasn't stable. And it wasn't the kind of environment Janet had grown up in.
Yeah, it seems like a huge contrast to what she was growing up in for everything that you just talked about. And that added sense of danger because she was a misfit trying to fit in somewhere. So it sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Right, and as I mentioned, she grew up in a very structured Christian home. So she wasn't really exposed to some of the crazy shit that's going on out there, right?
Yeah.
She didn't have the ability to kind of really sniff it out.
Nor did she really have the tools to be able to sniff that kind of stuff out. If that's not how she grew up, that's not what she was familiar with, she would never be able to figure that out.
Right. And sometimes when someone steps into a world that different, they don't immediately pull away. Sometimes they try to adapt. At just 22, Janet was trying to find her footing, trying to figure out where she belonged. And at the Blue Mill Inn, there were people, there was attention, there was interaction that she hadn't always found elsewhere.
Right. And so this to her, this might have felt like finally belonging, finally being included.
Right. And when you've felt on the outside, even imperfect inclusion can feel like connection. And connection can be powerful. The staff, the guards, the people moving through that space, they formed a kind of social circle. Not a healthy one, certainly not a stable one, but a circle nonetheless. And within that circle, dynamics began to form. Attention, perception, and eventually tension. Lori Swank was part of that environment. She worked at the motel. She was in the same social orbit as Janet. And on the surface, she appeared to be a friend.
Yeah, the kind of friend you gravitate towards when you don't have a lot of other people around you.
Right. Familiar. Accessible. Someone who seemed to understand the space you were both in. But relationships and environments like this don't always develop in straightforward ways. There were perceptions about Janet, about who she talked to, who she spent time with, how she moved within that group. And some of those perceptions would later be repeated in testimony. Others would be shaped by the people telling them.
So we don't actually know what was really real, what was actually true, versus what people were just saying later.
That's exactly right. And it's important to separate the two because in group environments, perception can become reality, whether it's accurate or not. And once that happens, people don't always respond to the person in front of them. They respond to the version they've created. Now, at some point, something shifted. Not all at once, not in a way anyone could clearly point to, but gradually, lines were blurred, boundaries loosened even further, and the way Janet was seen began to change.
Yeah, that's the part of when people are storytelling, that's the part that it's a little scary. Because when people stop seeing you as you, they see you how they invented you. They see you from their perspective. They don't see you. Does that make sense?
Total sense. Now, because once someone is no longer fully seen as a person, it becomes easier for others to judge things they normally wouldn't. Now, there were conversations, jokes that weren't really jokes, ideas that should have stopped the moment they were spoken, but they didn't. And in a place where no one stepped in, where no one drew a clear line, those ideas were allowed to exist. Janet Chandler came to the Blue Mill Inn looking for direction, for connection, for a place to land while she figured out what came next. What she found was something else entirely. An environment that was already shifting, already unstable, already moving toward something no one would stop. And in the next part of the story, we begin to see how those shifting dynamics turned into something far more dangerous. Not in a single moment, not in one direction, but in a series of choices, each moving the line just a little further. In environments where boundaries are already loose, where behavior goes unchecked, ideas can shape that wouldn't survive anywhere else. They start small. A comment, a joke, something said in passing that should have been stopped immediately, but it wasn't.
So, the something said in passing, I'm still not really sure what it is, but nobody shut it down and it just kept going?
Yep. And when no one challenges it, it begins to feel acceptable. Then at some point, the conversation shifted from talk to intent. There were discussions about confronting Janet, about bringing her somewhere under false pretenses. Some will later describe it as a party, others as something meant to humiliate her.
Yeah, either way, that doesn't sound like it's a party.
It wasn't, but calling it that made it easier to say out loud. And this is where something important happens. Something we see in group crimes again and again. Responsibility begins to spread out. One person suggests something, another laughs. Someone else doesn't object. And slowly, the weight of what's being proposed doesn't belong to any one person anymore.
Yeah, gross. I'm getting a gross feeling because you're going to tell me a bunch of stuff that I don't like that's going to happen to this girl. But let me just say, I'm imagining now that nobody in this group feels like it was their decision. They're all blaming someone else for it. Is that what's happening?
Kind of. And that's what makes it so dangerous. At multiple points, someone could have stepped in. Someone could have said, no, this stops here. But no one did. Not the people talking, not the people listening, and not the people who would later be there.
That's what makes it worse, because it didn't have to happen. At any point, somebody could have stepped in. This didn't have to happen.
No, it didn't. While these conversations were happening, Janet had no way of knowing. She was still moving through her life, working her shifts, interacting with the same people, trusting the same environment. And that contrast is one of the hardest parts of this story.
And she had no idea what was being planned or what was being said about her.
Nope, and no reason to believe it. Eventually, the plan moved forward. Janet was invited to come to her room, told her there would be a gathering, a social setting. That was something familiar, something that didn't raise alarm.
So she just thought she was going to hang out.
Yeah, like so many nights of previous partying at the hotel. But the difference this time is they were taking her somewhere else. And that's what should have caught her attention. And that's what makes what comes next so difficult to sit with. Because once she entered that space, the dynamic changed. The tone shifted. The atmosphere tightened. And what had been discussed began to unfold. Multiple people were present. And what followed was not one act, but a series of actions carried out by more than one person.
Yeah, okay. And eventually we're going to get to the spot where you're going to say who got blamed and who didn't. And let me just tell you, they're all to blame because no one stopped it.
That's right. No one stopped it. And this is where it's important to be clear. What happened to Janet Chandler was not the result of one person losing control. It was the result of a group making decision after decision not to stop. And in that room, Janet was no longer being seen as a person. And that's where everything breaks. What happened in that room would not stay there because actions like that don't disappear. They follow, they surface, and eventually they demand to be answered for. Now, in the next part of the story, we are going to step into the aftermath, what happened next, and how the silence began. Now, at some point, it stopped, not because someone chose to end it, but because it had already gone way too far. There is no single clear moment in the record that marks the end. Only fragments of people remembering, realizing that something irreversible had happened.
Yeah, and they all knew.
Yeah, they knew. And then came another set of decisions. What to do next, what to say, or more accurately, what not to say. Because in that moment, there was still a choice to call for help, to tell someone, to stop the silence before it started. But no one made that choice.
So instead, what did they all do?
They just stayed quiet. Janet Chandler was taken from that room, moved away from the place where everything had happened. Her body was left in the cold, along a roadway in Michigan, half buried in snow. And then, something almost harder to understand. Life continued. People went back to work. Conversations resumed. Shifts were worked. And on the surface, nothing had changed.
That's never gonna not be crazy to me. How do you just go back to normal after that?
You don't. Not really. But you pretend to. Silence doesn't always arrive all at once. Sometimes it settles in. A look exchanged. A conversation avoided. An understanding that this stays here. And once that silence takes hold, it becomes harder to break. It wouldn't stay hidden. Janet Chandler was found not long after, a young woman alone in the cold.
Yeah, and that's how the world meets her. The world meets her after everything.
Yeah. Not as a student, not as a musician, but as a victim. Law enforcement responded quickly. There were signs that this was not an accident. Interviews were conducted. Leads were followed. But something was already working against them.
Yeah, the planned silence.
Exactly. Because the people who knew what happened were the same people who were not talking. And without that, the truth stayed just out of reach. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and eventually the investigation slowed. There were no arrests, no clear suspects, only a young woman whose life had been taken and a story that no one would fully tell. And slowly, the case went cold. For nearly 3 decades, Janet Chandler's story sat in silence. But silence doesn't erase truth. It only delays it. And in the next part of the story, something unexpected happens. A group of students began asking questions, and the silence begins to crack. Something unexpected happens. By the early 2000s, Janet Chandler's case had been cold for decades. There were files, interviews, leads that had gone nowhere. And so, like many cold cases, it sat, waiting.
That's always the thing about cold cases. Everything just stopped.
It does. unless something pushes it forward again. And that push came from an unlikely place, a documentary film at Hope College, led by Professor David Schock. His students were tasked with telling a real story, and they chose Janet Chandler.
Students, huh? Like college students took this on as a documentary film project?
Absolutely, they did. And they approached it like investigators. They reviewed old reports. They spoke to people in the community. They asked questions that hadn't been asked in years. And more importantly, they asked them out loud.
So these students were like, what do they say? Sparkling your eye, or whatever, what kind of idiom you want to say for you, Trace, is because it's exactly why we have these phone calls. You want to do the same thing. Get the conversation going about something old, an old case, a cold case, that wants to get a fresh breath of air into the case to get things stirred up and going again. So after all this time, a group of kids is doing the investigative reporting and the investigative digging into all this.
Yeah, they're putting it right back in the face of the community. Not only locally, nationally. And that matters more than people realize, because silence can exist as long as no one challenges it. But when cameras show up, when questions are asked, when people realize the story isn't gone, something shifts. Memory comes back, details resurface, and for some, the weight of what they've been carrying gets heavier. Now, the documentary didn't just reach the public, it reached law enforcement. Investigators looked at the case again, not as something buried, but as something still solvable.
So these kids bringing it back out into the light of day, this is what got the attention of law enforcement, and this is why they decided to reopen it, huh?
Absolutely. And I think this is the coolest thing ever.
I know. You probably geeking out about this whole story, to tell you the truth.
You know I was.
It's right up your alley.
You know that's right.
Yeah.
Now, a cold case team was formed, including local police and investigators from the Michigan State Police. And this time they go all in. They begin re-interviewing people, not casually, not briefly, extensively, across multiple states, over hundreds of interviews. And they start hearing something they hadn't heard before.
Yeah, people talking.
That's right.
People talking after 3 decades of holding it in and staying silent and dealing with their own demons about it. And hopefully, most of them have suffered karma in one way, shape, or form that was most likely of the negative type because they never talked before. So now they're talking.
Right. And I could not imagine how that would feel as a person to carry around that horrible thing that you participated in. It's insane. Now,
yeah, well, I'm of the mindset that most of them had probably paid in one shape or in one way, shape, or form, because karma be a bitch.
Karma be a bitch.
Mm.
Now, slowly and carefully, they started talking. At first, it was small, a detail that doesn't match the old record, a memory that wasn't shared before. But then, something bigger. One of the individuals connected to that night begins to talk.
After all that time.
After all that time. And once one person speaks, it becomes harder for the others to stay silent. The story doesn't come out cleanly. It doesn't arrive fully formed. It comes in fragments. One person places Janet in a room. Another confirms who was there. Another fills in part what happened. And piece by piece, investigators begin to reconstruct a night that had been hidden for nearly 30 years.
Yeah, the part of investigations, that's the type that I would geek out on. The pieces are all coming together. It's like a puzzle. But instead of the pieces being puzzle pieces, they're people.
And not all of them want to fit. What investigators uncover confirms something devastating. This was not one person. This was a group that had kept a secret for decades. By 2006, the silence was no longer holding. The case that had once seemed impossible was now moving forward. Arrests were coming, charges would be filed, and for the first time, Janet Chandler's story would be told in a courtroom. And in the next part of our story, we step into that courtroom where the truth would finally be faced. Investigators had something they hadn't had before. Statements, admissions, pieces that fit together, and with that came arrests. Multiple individuals taken into custody nearly 3 decades after Janet Chandler's death.
And after all that time, they're finally going to be held accountable.
Yep. And for Janet's family, it was the first real movement in years. When the case reached the courtroom, it carried nearly 30 years of silence with it. Janet's family was there, sitting in a room where the people connected to her death would finally be named, and where the truth would come out piece by piece. There was no single clean narrative. No one person stood up and told the entire story. Instead, the truth came in fragments. Again, one person placing Janet in the room, another confirming who was present, another describing what they remembered. And slowly, the silence that lasted for decades began to break.
So let me understand something. They were all saying stuff, but they were all saying things differently?
Yeah, kind of in bits and pieces. Like nobody would tell the whole narrative, which is bonkers. It's like, the jig is up.
Yeah.
Just do it. Ugh, it's so frustrating.
I can't help my brain but thinking if they all kind of kept in touch with each other all those years. Just thinking in the dubious mind line, if somebody had died in those 30 years, they could have just all pinned it on him and got away with it even more. Not that karma wouldn't have caught up with them, but after 30 years, they could have had a scapegoat drop out along the way.
Yeah.
But either way, their stories were different from one another, but it was lining up. Is that what you're saying?
Right. It was just like you're just getting a little tidbit from this one and that one and that one. And when they put them all together, that's where the whole story became one story.
Yeah.
Now, among those facing the court was Lori Swank, someone who had known Janet, worked alongside her, and in fact was even Janet's roommate. Female jealousy at its best.
Oh, I can't stand it.
Now, in court, her role was not described as the most physically violent, but it was not dismissed because she was there. She saw what was happening and she didn't stop it.
Yeah, and she knew her, and she had nothing in her that was helping her. I'm sorry, I want to say that this little roommate friend, and I use that word ironically, was no friend at all. She didn't help her.
Nope. And that truth sat heavily in the courtroom. Prosecutors made something clear. This case was not about one person. It was about a group and the choices that group made. You don't get to stand in a room where harm is unfolding and walk away from responsibility. Not because you didn't start it, not because you didn't finish it, but because you were there. What the court ultimately faced was something difficult to define. A crime without a single point of ownership. A death that came from many decisions not to stop.
Yeah, like I said before, they're all absolutely responsible. But now that you've added this tidbit about the roommate being part of it, I feel like she was definitely the ringleader, or if not, a large instigation in it. But they're all responsible. And even if they didn't all do the same thing, they're all culpable for what happened to this poor child.
Yep, and you know damn well she was, like you said, probably the ringleader and getting some form of what she felt was payback. Who knows? I'm sure she was jealous. They were all partying every night, enjoying each other's company, so to speak, right? You get a female jealous over another female over some dude, it can be vicious.
Yeah, ridiculous reasoning, but yeah, I don't know what's wrong with some chicks.
I know. And that's what makes this case so different. When it came time for sentencing, the courtroom grew quiet. The tone was not loud, not dramatic, but it was firm. The court acknowledged the passing of time, but made it clear time does not erase responsibility. Each individual would be held accountable for their role. Some received lengthy sentences, others less, but all were tied to what happened that night. And through it all, Janet's family sat and listened, hearing details they never heard before. For nearly 30 years they had waited, and now they were hearing the truth in pieces, fragments of a night no family should ever have to understand.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I can't imagine sitting there and hearing all of that, especially the parts where they probably didn't want to hear. They didn't want to hear anything negative about their family member, all of the negativity that they probably were hearing for the first time, because they knew her as, you know, a lonely, keeping to herself kind of girl that was into her music. And now they're hearing about raucous nights that she had that they were unaware of, most probably. I don't know.
I know. I try to put myself in this family's position. This family, along with many, many, many others who have murdered loved ones, have to look and listen to the people that did this to your daughter. I can't wrap my head around just sitting there. Like, I just feel so sick to my stomach. I can only imagine what these poor people were going through.
Yeah, just sitting there and listening to all that.
Yeah, because nothing brings her back. Nothing erases what happened. But accountability matters. Truth matters. And for Janet Chandler, her name was finally spoken in a room where it could no longer be ignored. And in the end, what remains is not what was done to her, it was who she was. Now, 6 people were ultimately held accountable for Janet Chandler's death. Gordon Doug Hopp received a life sentence and died in prison. Others, including Robert Lynch, John Van Slembrook, and James Finn, received sentences ranging from 15 to 30 years. And Laurie Swank and Janice Hall received sentences of 10 to 20 years. Now, over time, several of those individuals became eligible for parole and were released after serving portions of their sentences. The full details of each release are not always consistently reported, but what is clear is that accountability came decades after Janet's life was taken. Now, there were other individuals connected to the environment around the Blue Mill Inn, people Janet knew, people she interacted with. Some were mentioned in interviews and recollections years later, but not all of those individuals were charged in connection with her death. During the investigation, there were multiple individuals connected to the Blue Mill Inn environment whose names surfaced, like Arthur Parva. Some of those individuals appeared in media coverage at the time, but it's important to be clear not everyone publicly associated with the case was ultimately charged or convicted. Now, at the end of the documentary from the students at Hope College called Who Killed Janet Chandler, there's a recording at the end which brought tears to my eyes. It's Janet sitting at a piano. She looks toward the audience and she smiles. Quote, "Hi, this is Janet, and I'm going to play piano." And for just a moment, she is in a case. She's a young woman with a life still unfolding. Janet Chandler should have been remembered for her voice, not for what was done to her. Now, I didn't get into all the nitty gritty, but she was horribly assaulted by one guard after the next, after the next, after the next. And ultimately, what ended her life was they were choking her with a belt around her neck when she was being assaulted. And it went too far.
Jeez. So not everyone that was in the room witnessing her assault, not all of them were convicted or paid the piper.
Right, and I believe it's just because of how long it went, right? 30 years. Memories fade. I mean, these were some seriously heavy-duty partying people. I'm talking alcohol, cigarettes, pot, pills, you name it. It's just hard to really pinpoint every single person. So there just wasn't enough evidence that would line up that everyone in that room, because they were all in the room watching it happen.
But what about the people that dumped her body? Like, there was probably a lot of them that were in on that. Did at least the people that dumped her body, the ones that were involved in that, were they at least charged?
Yes.
Okay. All
Yes.
right. Well, small favors.
Yeah, small favor.
Gross.
Yeah.
And you know what I think of that is also equally sad, that I think most people don't really give that much thought to, is she was not the only victim in all of this. All of the people that had anything to do with that, they then went on to live their own lives for 30 years. So every single person that they spent the next 30 years with, maybe they got married, maybe they had children, maybe whatever the case may be, it's all of those extraneous people that are now also victims.
Yeah.
From what they did, the choices that they made, and then the fact that they didn't take onus of it and they didn't pay the piper for any of it. And then they went on to live lives with other people. All of those other people have now been victimized by these people.
100%. Big fat spider web.
Yeah, that's the whole karma thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Do good and you'll get good. Do bad and you are nothing but bad.
100%.
Yuck.
But tonight we remember her as she was. And we say her name with dignity. Janet Chandler. Now, this is Malice in the Mitten, where the story matters, but the truth matters more. So thank you, everyone, as always. Please like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment on Apple Podcasts. A 5-star rating would be absolutely fantastic and help our show to grow. So we will see you all back on Wednesday for Round Robin. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.